Judgment of the Day: Kesavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala. The Kesavananda Bharati judgment is a landmark decision of the Supreme Court of India that outlined the basic structure doctrine of the Constitution. Justice Hansraj Khanna asserted through this doctrine that the Constitution possesses a basic structure of constitutional principles and values. The court partially cemented the prior precedent Golaknath v. State of Punjab, which held that constitutional amendments pursuant to Article 368 were subject to fundamental rights review, by asserting that only those amendments which tend to affect the basic structure of the Constitution are subject to judicial review. At the same time, the court also upheld the constitutionality of first provision of Article 31C, which implied that any constitutional amendment seeking to implement the directive principles which does not affect the basic structure shall not be subjected to judicial review. The basic structure doctrine forms the basis of power of the Indian judiciary to review and strike down amendments to the Constitution of India enacted by the Indian Parliament which conflict with or seek to alter the basic structure of the Constitution. The 13-bench judge Constitutional Bench of the Supreme Court deliberated on the limitations, if any, of the powers of the elected representatives of the people and the nature of fundamental rights of an individual. In a sharply divided verdict by a margin of 7:6, the court held that while the Parliament has wide powers, it did not have the power to destroy or emasculate the basic elements or fundamental features of the Constitution. Facts of the case. In February 1970, Swami Kesavananda Bharati, senior plaintiff and head of Ednir Mutt, a Hindu mutt situated in Ednir, a village in Kasaragod district of Kerala, challenged the Kerala government's attempts under two state land reforms acts to impose restrictions on the management of its property. A noted Indian jurist, Nana Bhoi Palkiwala, convinced Swami into filing his petition under Article 26 concerning the right to manage religiously owned property without government interference. Even though the hearings consumed 5 months, the outcome would profoundly affect India's democratic processes. The case had been heard for 68 days, the arguments commencing on October 31st, 1972 and ending on March 23, 1973, and it consists of 200 pages. Judgment. The Supreme Court reviewed the decision in Golaknath v. State of Punjab and considered the validity of the 24th, 25th, 26th and 29th Amendments. The case was heard by the largest ever constitutional bench of 13 judges. The bench gave 11 separate judgments, which agreed on some points and differed on others. Nana Bhai Palkiwala, assisted by Fali Narimal and Soli Sorabji, presented the case against the government in both cases. Judgment. The Supreme Court reviewed the decision in Golaknath v. State of Punjab and considered the validity of the 24th, 25th, 26th and 29th Amendments. The case was heard by the largest ever constitutional bench of 13 judges. The bench gave 11 separate judgments, which agreed on some points and differed on others. Nana Bhai Palkiwala, assisted by Fali Nariman and Soli Sorabji, presented the case against the government in both cases. Majority judgment. Upholding the validity of Clause 4 of Article 13 and a corresponding provision in Article 368 Clause 3 inserted by the 24th Amendment. The court settled in favor of the view that Parliament has the power to amend the fundamental rights. However, the court affirmed another proposition also asserted in the Golaknath case by ruling that the expression amendment of this constitution in Article 368 means any addition or change in any of the provisions of the constitution within the broad contours of the preamble and the constitution to carry out the objectives in the preamble and the directive principles. Applied to fundamental rights, it would be that while fundamental rights cannot be abrogated, reasonable abridgment of fundamental rights could be affected in the public interest. The true proposition is that every provision of the Constitution can be amended provided the basic foundation and structure of the Constitution remains the same. Significance of this judgment. This judgment ruled that Article 368 does not enable Parliament in its constituent capacity to delegate its function of amending the Constitution to another legislature or to itself in its ordinary legislative capacity. This ruling made all the deemed constitutional amendments stipulated under the legislative powers of the Parliament as void and inconsistent after the 24th constitutional amendments. These are Articles 4 Clause 2, 169 Clause 3, 239A2, 244A4, 356, Para 7 Clause 2 of Schedule 5 and Para 21(2) of Schedule 6. Also, Articles 399AA Clause 7B, 343M Clause 4 Clause B, 343ZC3 and 312 Clause 4, which are inserted by later constitutional amendments and envisaging deemed constitutional amendments under legislative powers of the Parliament should be invalid. The Supreme Court declared in the case A.K. Roy, etc. versus Union of India and Anr. On 28 December 1981 that the Article 368 Clause 1 clearly defines constituent power as the power to amend any provision of the Constitution by way of an addition, variation or repeal. It reiterated that constituent power must be exercised by the Parliament itself in accordance with the procedure laid down in the Article 368. The government of Indira Gandhi did not take kindly to this implied restriction on its power by the court. On 26 April 1973, Justice Ajit Natre, who was among the dissenters, was promoted to Chief Justice of India, superseding three senior judges, Shilat, Goyar and Hegde, which was unprecedented in Indian legal history. Advocate C.K. Dabhatari termed the incident as the darkest day in the history of democracy. Justice Muhammad Hidayatullah remarked that this was an attempt of not creating forward-looking judges, but judges looking forward to the office of Chief Justice. The 42nd Amendment, enacted in 1976, is considered to be the immediate and most direct fallout of the judgment. Apart from it, the judgment cleared the deck for complete legislative authority to amend any part of the Constitution except when the amendments are not in consonance with the basic feature of the Constitution. The basic structure doctrine was also adopted by the Supreme Court of Bangladesh in 1989 by expressly relying on the reasons given in Kesavananda Bharati case and its ruling on Anwar Hossain Chowdhury versus Bangladesh.